Hi, my name is Michael Salazar. I'm the new gTLD Program Director. I'd like to spend a little time with you today to discuss the evaluation and application process. So this session is about the application and evaluation process. I think that for a lot of you who've had a first opportunity to look through the applicant guidebook, it's probably fairly daunting. The applicant guidebook is over 300 pages, over 80,000 words, and it looks like a fairly daunting process. But the good thing is the application process is really covered over modules 1 and 2. I'm going to highlight some key points about the application process and the evaluation process through this presentation. And then a little bit later, Rob Antrobus will talk to you about the TLD application system. Who can apply? When can they apply? Where can they apply? What the evaluation process looks like. We'll talk a little bit about the TLD application system. And then we'll leave you with some additional information or where you can find additional information or ask questions. Who can apply? Any established organization, corporation, entity in good standing can apply. The fee is $185,000 and the rules are contained in the guidebook. I want to be clear about this. It needs to be an established organization. An individual or a sole proprietorship cannot apply, and organizations that are looking to form joint ventures must have formed that joint venture prior to applying so that it is actually in fact a legal entity. What types of TLDs are there going to be? So there are standard TLDs, which is at the bottom of the screen here, which is really sort of everything else apart from community-based TLDs, geographic, and IDNs. For those three types of TLDs, there are additional rules in the guidebook, and we'll kind of highlight what some of those are through this presentation. So a community-based TLD. A community-based TLD is really for the benefit of a clearly defined community. And it really comes into play twice through this application process. The first time is if you designate yourself as a community-based TLD, you may get preference once we go into string contention sets. String contention sets are really formed when two strings look visually similar. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But the community-based designation will give preference to those strings that are in fact community-based over other types of TLDs. The second time that the community-based TLD comes into play is when you sign your registry agreement. There are additional restrictions that may apply when you're going through the registry agreement if you have in fact been designated or you've designated yourself as a community-based TLD. So we must give appropriate consideration to the interest of governments. Geographic names is one of those considerations, and what it does is allow the protection of certain names. Names that are on ISO lists, ISO 3166-1 or ISO 3166-2, or some of the UN lists will be considered geographic names. In addition, some city names may be considered geographic names. What I think is important here is that there's some additional work that you as the applicant will have to do. If you are deemed a geographic name or you designate yourself as a geographic name, you will have to get a letter of support or non-objection from the government that represents that particular geographic name. In addition, the geographic panel will look through the applications. They will look at the name that's being applied for and determine whether or not that actually represents a geographic name. So for example, you may represent a city, but perhaps have not signified that you want to be a geographic name. You will be deemed a geographic name. You have a name that it looks like a capital city or a region that is covered under one of the ISO lists. You will be deemed a geographic name. At that point, the evaluation panels will reach out to you to let you know that you've been deemed a geographic name, and you'll have to go through the additional steps of securing the letter of support or non-objection. So it is critical for you as the applicant that you go through that process now prior to applying so that you have as much time as necessary to get through those requirements and submit the appropriate documentation. IDNs, so on the bottom half of this slide, you will see a number of international domain names that have been submitted through the IDN fast track process. Essentially, these are non-ASCII characters. And there are special rules that apply to IDNs. They're covered in the applicant guidebook. Really, the rules are more technical in nature, but certainly you should read the guidebook, primarily modules 1 and 2, to look at what the requirements are to submit an IDN name. So when can you apply? So there are 3 critical dates that are highlighted here on this slide. The first is the application window is going to open on the 12th of January. The second is that the application window, which will last for 90 days, will close on the 12th of April. But critical to that timeline, or within that timeline, is the 29th of March. And why is that critical? There are a number of steps that you'll have to go through to submit an application. Those steps will take some period of time to get through. We recognize that there's some period of time that is going to be required, and in order for an applicant to submit a complete application, which includes the evaluation fee, those steps need to be completed or at least started by the 29th of March. So if you have not registered in the TLD application system, which we'll talk about a little bit later, for a slot, then you will not be able to continue with the application process. Where to apply? TLD application system, or TAS as we call it. This will be posted online. Links will be on our gTLD website that will take you to the TLD application system. I think what's important here is that there will be a lot of guidance provided for the TLD application system, or TAS. Rob will walk through a demo. We will have that demo posted on site on our website for you to access. There will be user guides. In addition, once you're in the TLD application system, there are online help screens that will guide you through the process. I think what's important to note here is that there are limitations to the amount of information you can provide for certain questions. So there may be page limits, which are currently contained in the applicant guidebook and will be highlighted again in the TLD application system, as well as there are requirements to upload certain documents. The letter of support or non-objection for a geographic name, network diagram, security policies, etc. The TLD application system will walk you through that. So I just want you to be aware that there are certain requirements regarding the TLD application system, and there's plenty of help online for you. So the application process. So this particular slide is a little convoluted. Really, the process is not that complicated. We talked a little bit about registering in TAS as the system that will drive the application process. But you will register in TAS, you will request an application slot, and that slot allows you to submit your application. You will complete the application, provide the fees, provide the supporting documentation, and then submit the application to ICANN. Again, because of the number of steps that you have to go through, it is critical that you register early. And in fact, we strongly encourage you to start the application process as early as possible. It will take time to get through. There is help available, and you should take advantage of that help through the process. So what does the evaluation process look like? Actually, it tracks to the guidebook very well. If you look at the screen and you look at the modules, modules 1 through 5 track to each of the major components of the evaluation process. I think what's important here on this slide is that as you go through the application period and you submit your application, initial evaluation will start. We expect that the majority of applications will sail through the initial evaluation period and will go through transition to delegation. However, there are side paths that could happen. You could have an objection filed. Your string could be confusingly similar to another, or perhaps you may not have passed certain panels in the process. So there are side steps, and we'll kind of walk through that a little bit further. So again, let's go back to this basic evaluation path. You'll submit your application. It'll be received by the 12th of April. We will conduct an administrative check, meaning that ICANN will go through to ensure that the application is complete and that all the documents have been submitted, as well as the fee has been received. On or around the 1st of May, we will post the strings that have been applied for, as well as the public portions of the application. The administrative check will continue for roughly another 6 weeks, and then we begin initial evaluation. Through that process, there are a number of panels that you go through, including the background screening process. That process lasts 5 months. Again, if you're a clean application, then you will go into the transition to delegation period, which will begin roughly in the middle of December, so that we actually expect that applications or strings will be delegated as early as January of 2013. Extended evaluation. So what does that path look like? So again, you've gone through initial evaluation. There's been an issue with one of the panels, and you did not pass initial evaluation through the first time. You then have an opportunity to elect extended evaluation. At the end of initial evaluation, applicants will be given 2 weeks to elect extended evaluation. I think what's important to note here is that it is an election. It's not automatic, so you should pay attention to the results of the initial evaluation. And for those applications that require or that may need to go through extended evaluation and do not elect, that's the end of the process for them. They will not be eligible for further review. So again, it is important that you pay attention to the results of your application to determine whether or not you have to elect extended evaluation. Opportunities for clarification. So I know that there are concerns about how additional information could be provided to the evaluation panels, but I want to be clear here because it's not really new information, it's clarifying existing information that was provided during the application submission process. So what's going to happen? The applications will be submitted, we'll go through the administrative check, they'll be sent off to the evaluation panels to do their work. They will do their work, they will evaluate the questions. They may come across some of the information and not be clear as to what your answer was, and therefore may need some clarifying information from you. They will prepare a set of questions, and those questions will be sent to the applicant. The applicant essentially has roughly 2 weeks to provide that clarifying information, and then the evaluation panel will continue on. So that happens once in initial evaluation. Under the assumption that you do not pass initial evaluation and you elect extended evaluation, you have another opportunity to provide clarifying information. So there are 2 opportunities to provide clarifying information on your application through this process. Protecting important interests and rights. So this really is about Module 3, and this is really focused for the community that perhaps have not submitted applications but are still part of this process. They may object to an application on one of 4 grounds: string confusion, legal rights, limited public interest, or community. Module 3 sort of highlights what that process looks like. The next slide that I'll show you at a very high level, I'll walk you through what that process looks like. In addition, there is GAC advice on new gTLDs, and I think it's very important that you understand what that process looks like, because there could be concerns raised by the GAC on the string that you've applied for, or maybe perhaps there could be concerns on the applicant applying for a specific string. So be on the lookout for GAC advice through this process. So what does the objection period look like? The objection period actually opens on the 1st of May, which is the day that we post the gTLD strings and the public portions of the applications. The objection period will last for 7 months. So it will encompass the initial evaluation period plus extend 2 weeks beyond initial evaluation. Once that period is closed and all the objections have been submitted, the dispute resolution process will begin, and that process will last for 5 months. So again, you could have an objection filed on any one of 4 grounds. During that process, the applicant has the opportunity to respond to that objection and provide that information to the dispute resolution provider. Once that information is collected, a group of expert panelists will review the objection and the information, if any, provided by the applicant, and will make a determination if the applicant is successful or if the objector is successful. And at that point, that information will then get posted on our website. So the advice of government. So I think that this is actually a very important component of the application process. So there's one thing that I really want to make clear. There is an application comment process and a GAC early warning process, and they are separate. The application comment process allows the internet community to provide comments on your application. That's a 60-day window, which begins from the 1st of May and extends into about 2 weeks of the initial evaluation period. The commenter is required during that period to use a designated form to identify the application that they are submitting a comment on and to direct it to the evaluation panel. Any comments received within those 60 days will be considered by the evaluation panels. Comments received after those 60 days will not be considered by the evaluation panels. However, they will be maintained and they will be made available perhaps for other processes such as the dispute resolution process. The GAC early warning process. So if one or more governments on the GAC review a string and determine that it is sensitive or there may be some problems with that particular string, they can submit an early warning to the applicant. And I want to be clear. The early warning is not an automatic rejection of the application. It's simply an early warning letting the applicant know that the GAC, one or more governments within the GAC, have some sensitivity or feel that there may be some concern with the particular application. You should take that seriously because that early warning could eventually lead to GAC advice down the road. Now, with the GAC early warning, what does that process look like? When the information is received, it will be forwarded to the applicant. The applicant will have 21 days to review that information and make a determination how they want to proceed. If they choose to withdraw their application within that 21-day period, they will be eligible for an 80% refund of their application fee. If they choose to move forward, then the regular application refund amounts will continue to apply. So if you withdraw prior to the end of initial evaluation, but after 21 days from the GAC early warning period, then a 70% refund applies. The Government Advisory Committee advice, or the GAC advice. So that period of time actually runs concurrently with the objection period. So it'll start on the 1st of May, and it will end 2 weeks after the end of initial evaluation. That is an opportunity for the GAC to provide advice to the board on specific applications or a set of applications. Once that advice has been provided, then the board will consider that advice. The applicants will be notified that advice has been provided, and the process will continue forward, and the board will make a decision on what to do with that advice. String contention. So I talked a little bit about confusingly similar strings. So in the guidebook, we talk about strings that are so visually similar that it will confuse the end user using the internet. So there is a string contention process. If strings are so similar, visually similar, they will form a contention set. That process actually starts during initial evaluation, and we will post the results of string similarity fairly early on within initial evaluation so that the applicants are aware if they're in a contention set or if they're not in a contention set. I think what's important here is that there are a number of ways to resolve contention sets. The first being community-based application. So if you have designated yourself as a community-based application and you pass the criteria that's highlighted on this slide, then those applications within that contention set will receive priority. If you're not a community-based application, then really what we're looking for is that the applicants make some sort of agreement amongst themselves to resolve which string will go forward. Failing that, the last option here is an auction process. So if the parties are unable to agree to determine which string should move forward, then the parties within the contention set will go through an auction process. The auction process is actually laid out in detail in the guidebook, and I suggest that you pay particular attention to that, especially if you're in a contention set. Transition to delegation. So you've now successfully passed the application process. The next step is to go through the transition to delegation. So what does that mean? You will sign a registry agreement with ICANN within 9 months of being notified that you successfully passed the application process. And once that is done, you will go into a pre-delegation test. Once the pre-delegation test is done, then you're handed over to ICANN to go through the ICANN process and then be delegated into the route. So key dates. I've talked about a number of key dates throughout this process, but I want to highlight these once again. The application window opens on the 12th of January. The initial registration must be completed by the 29th of March, and the application window closes on the 12th of April, meaning all of your information must be submitted as well as your fee received. We will post the public portions of the application as well as the string on the 1st of May, which also kicks off a number of processes: the application comment process, GAC early warning, the objection process, and the GAC advice period. The initial evaluation period will begin on the 12th of June and will end on the 12th of November. The GAC early warning and the comment periods then end on the 30th of June. So, as I mentioned before, you need 2 weeks after the end of initial evaluation to elect extended evaluation. That date is set currently at the 29th of November. We will then begin these additional processes on the 1st of December. And the other dates here are posted for your information. All of these dates, by the way, will be posted on the gTLD website. So with that, I want to hand it over to Rob Antrobus, who will walk us through the TLD application system. And then we'll come back and I can just show you one last slide with some additional information.
Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. As Mike mentioned, I'm going to speak to you today about the TLD application system, or TAS as we call it. We've created a TAS interactive demo that allows you to walk through and see some of the main components of the application. What you can see from the screen you're looking at here are the 4 components that the demonstration covers. Your registration into the system, your completion of an application profile, you're requesting new applications, and ultimately the final step is in completing an application and submitting it. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to take you through the latter 3 steps: the completion of a profile, starting new applications, and completion of those applications. So let's start with the user profile. TAS works in essentially a linear fashion, and you have to complete steps in order. The first of those steps is the completion of your profile. The profile is associated with questions 1 through 11 of the applicant guidebook. I'll show you how the screens map to that in just a moment. Let me talk for just a second about your home page, which is where we've just landed. This is the page where you're going to work throughout the process. It lists the steps that you have to do in the completion of your profile, as you can see here. It lets you know when you can begin new applications. And ultimately, under the My Applications list, you'll see all of the applications that you currently have active, and we'll see that a little bit later. So let's complete a profile. Here we are on the first page, which is contact information. We want to collect the primary and secondary contact information, and that's what this screen does. After submitting our contact information, we need to capture the entity or the applicant's contact information. This is the entity that will ultimately enter into a register agreement with ICANN. So now we're going to collect the officer and shareholder information, and this is all associated with question 11 of the applicant guidebook. This allows the user to enter in information for your officers, your shareholders, your directors, and other people generally involved in the application process or associated with the entity who's actually submitting the application. Once we've added items and captured the basic information for those individuals, we want to complete question 11E through H, and that's simply signing off on any issues that may be associated with those individuals. Continuing, we then collect information regarding the payer or the individual or entity who's going to be submitting the payment for both the application deposit as well as the full application fee. So now we're going to collect information regarding the proof of establishment for the applicant. This is associated with questions 8, 9, and 10 of the applicant guidebook. There are required fields on this screen and many screens, and you're not able to proceed until you actually complete those required fields. Finally, we present you with a confirmation screen of all the information you've just entered regarding your user profile or your applicant profile. Take great care in reviewing that information. Because it's used in our review process, we don't want users to change it after it's been submitted. So you should review it with great care and then submit it. So now if we continue, we now have the ability, as you can see, to start a new application. And you have to agree to the terms and conditions associated with every application. These are the terms and conditions in Module 6 of the applicant guidebook. Check off on each of the items. At the bottom of the screen, if you were to scroll down, you'll have to enter your username as it is in your profile, agree to the final 2 components, and then accept those terms and conditions to continue. We've now requested an application. I've taken you back to the home screen, and I'm going to show you what it now takes to actually complete an application. You can now see that you have your next task, which is the big one in all of this, and that's to complete the application. On the left-hand side and below is essentially a grid showing all of the questions that you have to respond to. This is questions 13 through 50 of the applicant guidebook, and you'll access each of those from this screen. So anytime you need to respond to a question, you click on the associated link on this screen. So in the interactive demo, we let you look at some good examples of how we're going to respond to questions in TAS. Let's look at questions 13 through 17, which are largely associated with the string. As you can see, and as I mentioned, there is an option for you to indicate whether this is for an IDN or not. If it is, and I click that radio button, the screen will expand, allows me to collect additional information. And in several instances throughout the application, we allow you to provide attachments. In this particular case, you can see on question 15 where attachments are required. The remainder, questions 22 through 50, there's a lot of information captured there. I'm not going to take you through all of those. Simply one example. The form for all of these responses is the exact same. The only difference as far as you're concerned is that I'm getting a different question and providing a different response. So if we click there, you can now see what that looks like. You're given an entry field. For this particular question, an attachment is not required. Where an attachment is required for questions 22 through 50, it will be indicated in the yellow box at the bottom of the entry field. And in those instances where it is, you simply click on the Manage Attachments button at the bottom and it'll let you attach documents associated with that question. Every time you've finished entering information, you click Save and Close. It's going to take you back to your application dashboard where you can click on the next question and continue. So now we've taken you through the entire application process, from completing your user profile and your applicant profile to starting a new application. You're requesting that application, ICANN's review of that request, your submitting of the deposit, and then on through to completing the entirety of the application. Thanks for your attention. We hope you enjoyed the presentation of the TAS Interactive Demo.
Thank you, Rob. So the last slide here is just some additional reference points for you, some more information. By all means, if you do have questions, please submit those questions at newgtld@icann.org. Thank you.